Hi everyone, this is Susan with Three Sisters Sundries. I am here today to show you a couple of World of Warcraft journals I made for my son. I originally made this one for him for his birthday. If you're familiar with WoW, you know that this is the Horde symbol, and it is mostly a writing journal, but I did get a couple of the games at a thrift store and added a few random pictures and maps and things for him. Also, it has this cool bookmark, and I did these faux raised bands on the spine. So when I gave it to him, he loves it. He's excited about it. But then he tells me, oh, I mostly play Alliance now. So if you're familiar with World of Warcraft, there are two main groups, the Horde and Alliance. And this is the symbol for the Alliance group. So when he told me that, I went ahead and made this one. Also with the raised bands, which is what I'd like to show you. So let's get to it. I'll show you how I made it. I started with this really sturdy bullet box and a purse that I no longer use, which is made of leather because I love leather. I cut it down to fit a 2.5 by 3-inch size journal. Then I cut 3 pieces of paracord for the faux bands and glued them to the spine with E6000 because it's super strong and it remains flexible when it's dry, so it's perfect for this kind of heavy-duty bookmaking. Now these faux bands imitate what would have been on books in the medieval period, I think, when they actually sewed the signatures to heavy strings like this, and it left bumps on the spine. So when it's dry, you trim off the edges of the paracord with hopefully sharper scissors than this. I've had these for ages, and so they're getting a little bit dull. So when you get the edges nipped off, you don't want to have really bulky ends. So use a craft knife, or this is a pen blade. They are super sharp. And you need to cut the ends of the paracord at a diagonal, so they kind of slope towards what will be the covers of the book. And the paracord is gonna fuzz up and unravel, but that is not a problem. Just keep working away at it until it's fairly smooth, and you can trim away the fuzzies. Okay, so when you're happy with it, eventually, then you're going to glue it to your leather. So I put the covers on to kind of measure exactly where I want it, but this is the first thing you're going to do. You are going to flood the spine with glue. Again, I used E6000. Bottle's running out, or the tube is getting kind of low, so it's a bit of a struggle, but especially you want a lot of glue right around the paracord, because you want the leather to stick into those grooves so that you have a nice defined raised area. So once you get that completely covered with glue, place it where you want it. And then you need to flip your project over and start pressing. And E6000 takes a long time to dry. If you use a glue that dries more quickly, this process won't be quite as lengthy. Then you can glue your covers on when you have your spine about where you want it. Again, I used a lot of glue because this leather was really thick and it sort of soaked up the glue. And struggling with my E6000 tube, but eventually got enough glue on there. Okay, and then just make sure that it will close properly. And you can see that because the glue takes so long to dry, you know, it pops back up again. So just work it. This is a Teflon bone folder. Love those things. They just slide over everything. So because this leather was really thick, I wasn't worried about it poking holes or anything in the leather. But you just need to smooth everything and again work really hard into the edges of your paracord. And you can see that the edges, the ends where you trim it, are nice, and it makes a nice smooth transition. There's not a big immediate drop off there where the paracord ends are cut. It's not too blunt. Then while it's drying, this is just kitchen twine. You wrap it around the whole book as tightly as you can, and especially press it into those edges of the paracord. Again, you want it to be as tight as you can so that your bands will stick out. Then leave it to dry. I left it overnight, and while it was drying, I made my signatures. This is the first time I've used this We Are Memory Keepers binding tool. It is great. I loved it, especially it worked great for this teeny tiny journal. As you can see, those pages are miniature. And I lost some footage here, but I just wrapped the edges of the leather around the cardboard and glued it down, left it again overnight to dry. And because, again, that leather's really thick, I decided to put a little bit of extra packaging down before I put down the end papers because of that depth. It would have left a big lump around the edge. So for the spine, it's going to be an open spine. So I laid down the extra packaging, and then there's my little text block. I sewed 3 signatures to some craft text. So this is the paper that I'm going to use for the end papers, and I glued that down before I put in the text block because it's going to show because of the open spine. So then again I think I used 3-in-1 to glue down the craft text to the book, but it poked out a little bit, so I just trimmed it a little bit. And then if you've ever done an open spine journal, you have to futz with it quite a bit to get it to lay the way you want it to. So put it where you want it. And make sure it will open and close. And then kind of clamp it down. You can see how the spine is open. Clamp it down and let it dry overnight. 3-in-1. The 3-in-1 beacon glue is also pretty flexible and quite strong. So I like to use that too. Then when it's dry, I glued in these end papers. They coordinate with the same papers that I used for the other journal. And I used the 3-in-1 for that as well. And because I put that extra packaging onto the cover, it's a little more even with the leather. In other words, there's not a big dip around the edges of the book. And do the same on the other side. And then clamp that and let that dry. The 3-in-1 dries a lot faster than E6000, so that's helpful. Okay, when that's all dry, I decided to put some corners on, some metal corners. And I think these are Tim Holtz corners. You can see that the spine looks nice and prominent, those bands. I wanted silver, so I used this Nouveau flakes and just kind of glued them on and burnished them down onto these. I think they were bronze before. I struggled a bit with these. Because again, that leather was so thick, they had a bit of a time fitting over the edges, but I eventually got them on. And that is the finished book. Except for the lion design, but you can see how great the whole spine looks. When I did the designs on the covers, I tried to find leather dye. I tried to use a variety of different products, and what I ended up using to do these designs was a Sharpie. It worked great. And then I accented the horde symbol with shoe polish and went around the journal with it too and tried to accent the spine a little bit as well. For the alliance symbol, again, you just used a blue Sharpie, a fine tipped one. But then this was what I had really wanted to use, was this really cool gilding polish. So what I did, because it was too difficult to get these fine lines, and I apologize if you know, wow, this symbol is obviously not perfect, but I just accented it with the gilding polish, and I think it turned out really great. And my son loves it, so that's what matters. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and we will see you next time.